All right, today we're jumping into a really interesting Substack article from the Appalachian Guerrilla. It's called "The Deep State Strikes Back," and believe me, it has a pretty explosive idea about a hidden war happening right at the center of American politics. We're going to break down exactly what the author is arguing.
So the article kicks right off with this line. It's meant to set a serious, high-stakes tone. It's telling you right from the get-go that this isn't about some polite political debate. This is being framed as a genuine conflict, a battle for keeps, and that's the lens for this entire piece.
So how are we going to tackle this? Well, we've broken it down into four main parts. First, we'll look at this idea of a secret war on voters. Then we'll get into the actual intelligence officers the author uses as examples. After that, we'll dig into the big picture theory, this clash of worldviews. And finally, we'll look at the author's pretty intense final warning.
Okay, so first up, what's the big problem the author is even talking about? The article starts by painting this picture of a country in real trouble, arguing that the everyday person is under a ton of economic and social stress.
The author lists out all these serious issues, right? Costs for everything, housing, food, cars are just skyrocketing. People are feeling isolated, and there are these huge demographic shifts happening. This is the backdrop, the scene being set. It's presented as the perfect breeding ground for populist anger and, in the author's view, for a secret counterattack from the establishment.
And this right here, this is the core claim. The argument is that in response to all that public anger, there's an organized pushback. The so-called deep state isn't just sitting back. The claim is that it's actively putting its own people, former intelligence officers, smack dab into the political system to control things from the inside.
Now, to back up a claim this big, you need some evidence, right? And the author doesn't just talk in generalities. The article points to a whole list of specific people, this new wave of politicians who have backgrounds in places like the CIA, the FBI, and military intelligence. Let's walk through the main examples.
First on the list is Abigail Spanberger. She's a former CIA counterterrorism officer, now a Democratic congresswoman from Virginia.
The article zooms in on her stance on immigration, specifically on ICE, and it presents this as proof, as evidence that she's pushing an agenda that's completely at odds with populist calls for tighter border security.
Next up is Joel Willett, a candidate for U.S. Senate in Kentucky. His resume is pretty extensive, covering the FBI, the CIA, and the military.
Now for the author, this is the real kicker, his history with the Trump administration. The fact that he had a security clearance pulled, well, that's framed as a huge red flag, a clear sign in the author's view of his opposition to the whole populist movement.
The third example we have is Alyssa Slotkin, another former CIA operative who is now a U.S. Senator from Michigan.
Here, the author points to her involvement in writing an op-ed that helped kick off the 2019 impeachment of Donald Trump. It's presented as Exhibit A of a former intelligence officer taking a direct political shot at a populist president.
And the pattern keeps going. The article also mentions Pat Ryan from Army Intelligence, Will Hurd, a former clandestine officer at the CIA, and Brian Fitzpatrick, a former FBI special agent. With Hurd, the author makes a special point about how he sometimes voted against his own party, which is supposed to suggest his real loyalty isn't to voters, but to the deep state ideology.
So what's the bigger picture here? According to the author, it's not just about a few ex-spooks running for office. No, it's about what they represent. This huge, fundamental battle for the soul of America. A fight between two worldviews that just can't coexist.
And here's how the author breaks down that conflict. On one side, you have the general public, the populace. They're driven by what the article calls the whims of the people. They want responsive, nationalistic policies. But on the other side, you've got this permanent bureaucratic state, which the author claims is pushing a long-term international agenda that serves the donor class. And to put a face on this bureaucratic state, the author brings up people like Victoria Nuland from the State Department and, of course, Dr. Anthony Fauci. The argument is that their incredibly long careers are perfect examples of officials who hold massive amounts of power, but, in the author's opinion, never really have to answer directly to the voters.
Then the article kind of takes a step back and pulls in this quote from way back, from the political thinker Alexis de Tocqueville. The point of using this is to say, hey, this isn't some new problem. The suggestion is that this tension, this fight between equality and freedom, has always been simmering just beneath the surface in American democracy.
All right, so let's bring it all home. In this final section, the author pulls all these threads together, and it leads to a pretty grim warning about where all this is headed.
The author's conclusion is crystal clear. You can't trust anyone from the intelligence world in a position of political power. The argument is that their training just makes them a different breed of politician and, as the author puts it, far more dangerous than your average one.
And from that distrust, you get some pretty chilling predictions. The author warns that as these figures get more power, we're going to see political violence go up. Government spying is going to get worse. The basic fear here is that these new leaders, who are used to the tools of espionage, are going to turn those tools not on foreign enemies, but on their own citizens.
And that really leaves us with the big, provocative question that this whole article is built around. When spies become politicians, who are they really working for? It's a question that makes you think hard about what representation, power, and accountability actually mean.